Chapter 419. Under the catalysis of Rinhong's spell power, the Blood Soul Temple underwent a reshaping type of growth. Luonan did not know the origins of the protective talisman that Rinhong crushed. A large amount of highly condensed spell power was accumulated inside. It was used as a seed, and it utilized a secret technique to absorb large amounts of faith power from the believers of the Order through the earth and soil. After being controlled and transformed, the faith power was poured into the Blood Soul Temple in an unending stream. Luonan did not understand the specific operating rules, but he could see that the mountain structure of the Blood Soul Temple had become more exquisite and natural. The 4 buildings on top of it grew more magnificent and dignified. As the Blood Soul Temple grew in turmoil, its absorption and devouring of the chaotic power of the Wraith sign became more and more unbridled. It seemed that the parasitic process of several dozen days was about to come to an end. It was currently fusing the human-faced arachnid's power into its own, attempting to devour it and replace its body. Was it not going to walk the remaining several hundred steps of the path of blood and fire? Or could it be said that Rinhong's rebellion was because he saw another golden path that could forge a perfect sacrificial artifact without going through the human-faced arachnid? Luonan did not know what Rinhong was thinking, but he did know that the effects of this method on his own closed system were quite obvious. It was so obvious that the other believer could sense it. Cat Eyes took the initiative to contact him. "Hey, is the line disturbed? It's very noisy." "Ignore it." Luonan urged the human-faced arachnid to rapidly jump within the two-way warped mental screen, leaving the material plane in an instant. The bodyguard, the deep blue walker, lost his connection to the human-faced arachnid and immediately reported, "Target lost." Tian Bang. "Not yet." Rinhong's hands firmly clasped the rubble in front of his knees, ensuring the stability of the psychic wave radiation. Sweat trickled down his forehead and cheeks, but a smile had already bloomed on his face. "I've locked onto it." "It's locked onto." Luonan also confirmed this point. He had already leapt into the middle zone, and he was far away from all devices and mental senses through the warping effect of the mental screen. However, Rinhong's incantation magic power continued to pour in through the shepherd's channel. Most importantly, the Blood Soul Temple released the element of blood flame as it absorbed energy endlessly. It attempted to assimilate everything in the surroundings to aid in the digestion. It was like red ink in a pool of water. It was not that easy to dilute. Unexpectedly, the contamination was spreading. The Wraith sign was very important within Luonan's closed system. It occupied the highest position within all of Luonan's believers. Chapter 420. Right now, a normal investment project has been turned into a hostile takeover by the other party. However, we still hold a certain amount of shares. We can make some changes and turn it into a bet. We'll bet on the ownership of the sacrificial artifact in the future. Elder Emoluan. Madame Halder's eyes focused and locked onto the coiling black smoke in front of her. From her point of view, this was just a variant of Jiang Yuanjin and Yin Li's irrational argument. "We no longer have the capital to raise the stakes." "Yes, I do. I just need a little." The shadow of the black smoke soul body pointed at itself. "I'm enough." "No." Yin Lu and Jiang Yuanjin spoke up at the same time. Yin Lu didn't really understand what Emoluan meant by bet, but that didn't prevent her from understanding his resolute intentions. She pressed down hard on her chest, almost crushing her heart. "You are the Order's stabilizing force. No matter what we do, we can't let you charge ahead. You bunch of people." Jiang Yuanjin clenched her fists and waved them as if she was fighting someone. "You're making things complicated." "Complicated?" That's a dream you'll live in forever. An angry rebuke suddenly rose from the black smoke, instantly subduing everyone present. The entire room sank into silence and the atmosphere froze. After the roar, the condensed black smoke began to drift away. The figure gradually faded, and Emoluan's voice seemed as soft as smoke. I only have a smattering of the efficient's investment theory. But I know that without a sacrificial artifact or an extraordinary, the blood flame order can't transcend the secular world. Only by following the efficient's train of thought can we continue to exist in this world and continuously accumulate power. Jiang Yuanjin pointed at the black smoke, but in the end, she retracted her arm and clenched her fist. When she opened her mouth again, her voice was hoarse. I've never opposed it. But is the Order's sacrificial artifact and orthodox inheritance also an investment? Or can we withdraw and break even to prevent losses? Madame Halder didn't reply. Emoluan actually laughed. I don't think about this kind of problem, but you specialize in theory. You should study it further. In a sense, this is your responsibility. At this point, Emoluan turned his attention to Lady Halder. Lord Officiant, I agree to retreat, but things happened too quickly. My body is still immersed in the frozen liquid and can't move. It will take some time for it to thaw. Madame Halder shook her head. According to the relevant contingency plans, we have a complete evacuation plan. The relevant vehicle is right next to your seclusion room. It will only take 15 minutes for the transfer to be completed, and it will last for more than 7 days. By that time we had reached Tyre and settled down again. We can start now. As he spoke, a new wave of information refreshed, and the intelligence peddler took out even more valuable information. He had secretly hacked into the building's surveillance system and borrowed the surveillance camera in a corner of the underground parking lot to spy on the area in the distance. From the surveillance screen, one could see a blood-red spiritual light spurting out from the end of the dark domain, as well as a slight spatial tremor. Jiang Yuanjin muttered, "It has already reached this level." In the next moment, it was as if he had woken up from a dream. Anger once again dominated his thoughts. He is pulling up seedlings to help them grow. If he continues to forge the blood-fire path like this, the foundation of the Blood Soul Temple will be destroyed by him. Lady Halder looked at the projection and said softly, "Perhaps he has an even better idea." "What?" "Boss." Yinlu felt the violent tremors coming from the mold. Combining it with the surveillance screen, she had already made a judgment. Ren Hong is forcefully transferring the priority of the shepherd. If we do not follow up, the Blood Soul Temple will be his in 20 minutes. Meng Chong, who had been standing solemnly, spoke for the first time. His voice was heavy. Ren Hong has been overdrawing on the believer's psyche power. This way, even if we want to counterattack in the future, we will not be able to gather enough psyche power for the ritual in a short period of time. Jiang Yuanjin gasped. If he is ruthless enough, he will continue to make this kind of consumption, forever maintaining the first move advantage. Lord Officiant. Madame Halder didn't say a word, but without any warning, she waved her arm towards where Emoluan's black smoke soul body was. Her fingertips brushed past, and the black smoke disappeared, leaving only nothingness. Yinlu and the others were stunned. In the next moment, Emoluan's voice echoed in the nothingness. The basic purpose of the bet is to know all their cards. Renhong, Tianbang, and what else? Yinlu suddenly came to a realization and ordered through her wristband, "Connect Elder Emoluan to the seclusion room." A minute later, the security personnel outside sent a message, trembling with fear. It was unknown when, but the personnel in charge of daily service and security work beside Elder Moluan had all fainted. The relevant scene was also transmitted back at the same time. It was taken after the robot had entered the seclusion area. It could be seen that the door of the seclusion room under layers of defense was opened, and the frozen liquid pool inside was already empty. Jiang Yuanjin groaned, "Blood flame above! Blood flame above!" Ren Hong knelt in the protection area of the incantation. Although his spirit was excited, his physical strength was close to exhaustion. He was an outstanding blood flame priest, and he had a deep understanding of the mold and the subtle changes in the blood-soul temple. It is currently not normal, and its instinct to avoid danger is too strong. It is a chaotic species, and should not react to the changes in its body. Tian Bang's high-speed descent was about to end, and the current situation was still under control. He was in the mood to chat. I feel that guy's intelligence is not normal. It has no intelligence. Is that so? I don't care about the conclusions of your research, but I saw that this guy attacked several times, and every time it hit the weak point. It hit the sore spot, and it came and went at will. It made the well-trained Deep Blue walkers lose face. What kind of monster have you raised with your herding? It is a mold, a mold. All right, mold. Tian Bang's voice suddenly cut off, and his gaze focused on the bottom of the building. The traffic was piled up there, and because the security department had already restricted access, the underground parking lot could only be left, but not entered. It was quite chaotic, and there was a person coming out of a taxi amidst the chaotic flow of people and traffic. He was dressed in very formal attire, like a white-collar worker returning to work overtime. But his pace was sluggish, and he still had the leisure to look up after coming out of the congested traffic. His gaze streaked across the glass curtain wall of Aurora Cloud City, and also across the blurred intersection of light and shadow, and the rapidly descending Tian Bang. The two's gazes intersected, and they saw each other's faces. The person downstairs looked to be a middle-aged man in his 50s. His figure was thin, and his face was pale, as if he was ill. But there was clearly a flame burning in his pupils. The flame had also left a clear mark on the mental plane. Everyone flipped the cards or flipped the table. Tian Bang's eyebrows twitched, more impulsive than expected, and better at finding opportunities. In just a moment of distraction, all that was left was the meaningless street scene below. The person had already entered the building, and his aura was immediately concealed. Tian Bang let out a breath, and spoke through the public channel. Mo Luan is here, have you prepared the plan? He came in a taxi. The frontline command center immediately exploded. Activating E-Plan, Mo Luan's body condition monitoring, codenamed Onyx Soul. Team 5, Team 6 control the underground area, long-range attacks are the first priority, Team 5 in position. Onyx Soul in position. Onyx Soul has entered the first floor of the underground parking lot. Yin-Yang Eye System, turn on. This Yin-Yang Eye System was a monitoring device that integrated many different wave detection. It did not have many methods to deal with spirit bodies, but as long as there was a physical body, the effect was still alright. Chapter 421. In the parking lot, there were all kinds of vehicles neatly arranged in three-dimensional frames. They were densely packed. In fact, apart from the first and sixth floors of the underground parking lot, the rest belonged to the field of mechanical automation. Only technicians and maintenance personnel could enter. The space here was narrow and the Deep Blue walkers couldn't fully display their abilities. It was a good rest stop. Mo Luan really liked the smell of engine oil here. It made him feel as if he had returned to his youth. However, the psychological inertia of middle-aged and old people still existed. These young people in the army. Mo Luan's heart was on guard before he finished speaking. I've let you down, senior. Tian Bang walked out from behind a pillar at the back. His shadow covered nearly his entire body. Only his pupils were bright like burning flames. No matter when or what group, the individuals are always uneven. Mo Luan sighed and continued walking forward. We should be able to reach the sixth floor. Tian Bang unhurriedly followed. There's nothing bad about this. Senior only used 4 floors to adapt to this body that hasn't been used for a long time. The rest is probably just to save strength. As he walked past the place where Mo Luan had previously stood, Tian Bang jumped up and touched the ceiling with his fingertip. His tentacles didn't change at all. This made him even more certain of his judgment. This is the legendary Black Soul Body, right? Using the Black Smoke Soul Body to wrap around the corporeal body and form a special form that intervenes the mental and material planes. Unfortunately, the consumption is too great. This is an ability prepared for extraordinaries. If it was 10 years earlier, if there wasn't any hesitation, if there wasn't internal strife, the voices of the two overlapped to a large extent, but in the end they were completely different. They stopped at the same time. The straight line distance between leather shoes and sneakers didn't exceed 10 meters. Tian Bang smiled in the shadows and met Mo Luan's serious face after he turned around. Approximately 2 seconds later, the corner of Tian Bang's lips continued to split open, revealing a few white teeth. Perhaps I should change my way of thinking. Senior, have you never thought that according to your current realm, if you had a powerful energy furnace that could provide you with an unending stream of strength? His voice was cut off. What cut off his words was Mo Luan's gloomy and ice-cold gaze. However, a gaze couldn't kill, at least it was ineffective against Tian Bang. He quickly raised his hand with a rich and subtle expression. I'm sorry. My natural disposition is frank. I've always felt that it was a pity that you chose a side in the past. If we followed the binding method, perhaps everyone would have opened up a new path a long time ago, instead of struggling for an ethereal possibility like now. They were rapidly spreading throughout the entire floor. This momentum. Level 1 cave-in response. Just as the command appeared in the tactical channel, a large piece of the floor came crashing down along with the steel bars. The rumble exploded and the lights dimmed for a time. Rubble rained down like rain. What was even more terrifying was that several ton heavy vehicles and steel frames came crashing down. The enormous impact seemed to cause the entire building to sway. It even brought along large pieces of the floor to come crashing down. It came crashing down like the sky was collapsing and the earth was caving in. It was as if doomsday had arrived. There were 3 squads of deep blue walkers on the 6th floor, and nearly 20 exoskeleton armors. Every single one of them was proficient in joint attacks. But when faced with the collapsing floor, any joint attacks were useless. Chapter 422. This was far too exaggerated. Luonan couldn't help but switch to a perspective that was closer to the material plane. He wanted to experience the grand scene of the entire floor collapsing. The originally stable structure collapsed in an instant. Hundreds and thousands of tons of heavy objects poured down in torrents, practically erasing all living space. Such a scene was quite shocking. He instinctively thought, 20 little deep blue walkers and that Rin Hong. They weren't all crushed to death, right? Oh, it doesn't seem that easy. An explosive rumble shook the 10-ton steel frame and the fixed body of the car were sent flying. Deep Blue Walkers Team 4, who were responsible for the protection mission, appeared with Rin Hong in the center, covered in dirt and grime. The 6 Deep Blue Walkers were able to maximize the use of their exoskeletons in the critical moment just now. They also borrowed the large falling steel frame to prop up a safe space. Such an astute and effective response was worthy of applause and praise. However, 2 Deep Blue Walkers of Team 4 fell to the ground in a short few seconds. Their auras rapidly weakened. The frontline command center received a message at the same time. Strong 3 and Strong 5 of Team 4 have been injected with Thunderfire. Requesting the use of inhibitors. Permission to immediately use inhibitors. Privileges have been unlocked. Injection complete. Medics will arrive in 45 seconds. Please open up the passageway ahead of time. Let's not talk about the price and chaos on this side. The blood-red light still existed in the center of Team 4's defense. However, the light swayed and scattered. Blood overflowed from the corner of Rinhong's mouth and nose. His scalp was smashed and blood flowed down his forehead. He was in an extremely sorry state. It was clear that in order to protect this source of spiritual light, he had paid a heavy price. Rinhong wasn't as calm and collected as before under these circumstances. He didn't care about his injuries at all. He just spread open his arms and did his best to gather the light. At the same time, he roared in a low voice, "Give me time! I need time!" Tianbang was already pouncing toward Nagua before Rinhong's roar could ring out. He also believed that Rinhong would be Mo Luan's first target. Not to mention anything else, just the destruction of the Shepherd's Privilege transfer ceremony was a tangible result for the Bloodflame Orthodox faction. However, Tianbang didn't expect that Mo Luan would actually play with such a large hand. He directly caused a floor of the underground parking lot to collapse. He relied on weight and gravity to stun the 3 well-trained deep blue walkers on the spot. As expected, this kind of veteran was the most troublesome. Before Meng Tu and the others could regroup, Tianbang had to fulfill his responsibility as the chief powerhouse and commander and build a temporary line of defense for Rinhong. In the time it took to think, Tianbang had already crossed a pile of steel ruins and approached the 4th defense line. He was about to enter it, but he felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. He didn't need to turn his head to know that there was black smoke and fire burning behind him. Mo Luan, who had disappeared at the beginning of the collapse of the building, seemed to have appeared out of thin air from the darkness of nothingness. "When did you get to the back?" The meaningless and distracting thoughts were washed away in a flash. Tianbang didn't make a sound and still didn't turn his head. Only the format of fire burst forth from his body. Fiery smoke surged straight into the depths of the spiritual plane, suppressing the tangible and intangible impact from the other side. On the material plane, the flames and the black fog collided and intertwined on a distorted surface. A large cloud of dust rose from the ruins. Then, the shock wave from the collision came. A strangle-like spirit wave tornado rose and cut the nearby steel frames and vehicle frames into pieces. At this moment, the destructive power of the 2B+ rank powerhouses was clearly displayed. The splashing fragments of the aftermath were also quite troublesome. Each fragment was comparable to a large-caliber rifle bullet. Even though they wore exoskeleton armor, they didn't dare to take a few hits. Team 5 and Team 6, who were attempting to encircle and regroup, were forced away once more. The unluckiest was still Team 4. They were practically at the center of the explosion, and they had to take care of Rinhong and the 2 wounded. The remaining 4 could only mobilize the format of fire with all their might and pull large stone slabs to use as temporary shields. They built a broken fort. Their reactions were already at their limit. The aftermath of the storm swept through several hundred square meters of space in the ruins at practically the same time. A few deep blue walkers gritted their teeth and withstood the whistling sound wave. Yet another person was struck by successive fragments. He was unlucky enough to be hit in a weak spot on his outer bones. The format of fire was unable to effectively defend against it, and he immediately collapsed with a spray of blood. Rinhong spat out another mouthful of blood behind the barrier that was leaking air and sand. The spiritual light that gushed out from the ground was abnormal. It was like pouring oil onto a fire. The dazzling radiance burst forth in an instant, nearly engulfing him. Even his priest robes began to burn without fire. Luonan felt like he was watching a large-scale New Year's Eve fireworks show right now. He couldn't help but want to find someone to talk to. "It's truly spectacular." Cat Eyes looked at the chaotic scene in the frontline command center. She didn't respond. She maintained her restrained silence. Luonan didn't really want to hear her answer. The changes to the Blood Soul Temple were still ongoing. The embryonic form of the altar could already be seen on the peak of the mountain. Ren Hong was using intense methods to forcefully push the Blood Soul Temple into the final few hundred steps of the path of blood and fire. He was also seizing the authority of the number one shepherd. He was worthy of attention. However, Luo Nan was gradually getting used to the perspective of the system. Ren Hong's efforts were far from being able to pierce through the clear sky above the Blood Soul Temple. Most of its significance was erased. In comparison, it was more meaningful to project the twin diagrams, namely the conflict between the orthodox faction of Blood Flame sect and the restraining faction. But even so, this was no longer the crucial segment. The 2B+ rank experts had already forcefully shifted the center of the whirlpool of conflict away from the instant Mo Luan and Tian Bang fought. After all, this was a world where strength spoke. Yes, this was a world determined by cognition. Luo Nan attentively watched the two experts collide. He quietly waited for the inevitable moment. The shock wave covered several hundred square meters, raising a large expanse of smoke and mist. The majority of lighting equipment had already been lost in the ruins of the 5th and 6th floors. The darkness and the dust made it impossible to see anything clearly. However, the two combatants no longer needed the guidance of light. They had already locked onto each other's energies and were colliding with each other on the mental plane. They had lost any information, but it was impossible for them to lose the existence of the other. Tian Bang was a bit distracted. He quickly glanced at the brightest source of light in the ruins before him. It was the psychic glow of Ren Hong's believers. But in this instant of distraction, a terrifying wind pressure brought a sense of danger and smashed over. It was the wreckage of a car that flew through the air at high speeds. Tian Bang didn't dodge. He raised his elbow and waved his arm, sending the wreckage of the car, which was wrapped in terrifying kinetic energy, flying away. The wreckage smashed into the unsteady mountain of ruins a dozen meters away. "Senior, you're too reckless." "Really? I thought I would be the one to say those words." Mo Luan's figure was hidden. He was like a ghost. It was impossible to tell if he was mentally or physically. The black smoke and flames possessed astonishing corrosiveness. Even Tian Bang, a cyborg life form, didn't dare to directly touch them. Tian Bang exhaled and shouted. The format of fire erected a high wall. Black smoke burned within the screen of fire that sprayed out, yet Mo Luan's indistinct face appeared. He smiled at Su Yangyi and then vanished. Fighting and running wasn't an option. Counterattack. Tian Bang's figure instantly changed from moving backwards to pouncing forward without any delay. However, an astonishing rumble and tremor rang out once more. An enormous steel frame and car came pouring down from the ruins a second time. This might not be the 5th floor's stock. The 3 floors above the underground parking lot weren't looking good either. This underground space was done for. Tian Bang came to a halt. He deeply felt that tonight's situation was getting bigger and bigger. Moreover, it had already exceeded the scope of all his plans. It was sliding in the most uncontrollable direction. At the frontline command center, the person in charge of the government's security department, who had always been willing to play a supporting role, couldn't sit still. After receiving a few calls, he couldn't help but loudly warn, "Major General Tian, this is Cloud City Water Village. It's a flourishing area where over 100,000 people reside. I repeat, this is a metropolis, not the wilderness." The continuous large-scale upheavals definitely couldn't be concealed. In particular, the underground parking lot was sealed off and there were sounds of the entire floor collapsing. Even the earthquake station had to make an announcement. Although they had followed the form of an earthquake warning earlier and carried out an evacuation, the contradictory elements were not so easy to explain. If this situation continued to develop, it would clearly be another Frost River reality terrorist attack. And this time, the main character was the military. The person in charge of the security department slammed the table with a bang. Tian Bang was also in a bad mood. "You're trying to throw the blame at this time. Emoluan's mocking face flashed faintly in the darkness. Another round of cannon shots came. That's why I said that the most fatal weakness of the post-war generations is that they take things for granted. Tian Bang curled his lips. Last time you said, they don't understand reverence. The meaning is similar, right? Senior, do you really need to play such a big game? Separated by the steel frame and the rubble, the two began to chat. In fact, they both had their own misgivings. They were pondering over the other's strong points and weak points in order to quickly accomplish something. Right now, the distance between the two was not far. It was about the same as when they first met. They were both around 10 meters apart. Emoluan was sitting on a piece of rubble. His back was half bent, and his elbows were resting on his knees. He seemed a bit tired, but he also seemed calm and composed. He was like many old soldiers. He began to brag about his military accomplishments in his free time and gave pointers to the younger generation. The most ruthless part of war is street fighting. In the 3 wars, the red-eyed enemy soldiers and the mutants that wreak havoc don't care if you're in a bustling city. Destruction and slaughter are the first things that everyone adapts to. How many of the metropolises of the world are left from before the war? Haven't they all turned into ruins? How far have we gotten? Destruction was what these old soldiers were most proficient at. Emoluan didn't mind emphasizing this point and adding a bit more pressure to Tianbang. There was a smile on his face. One of his eyes was tranquil, and the other was callous. Young man, look at more of the video material from the past. There's nothing bad about it. Tianbang also smiled. Understood, senior. But allow me to show some concern. It seems like you're 2 kilograms lighter? Tianbang extended 2 fingers. He didn't care if Emoluan could see them in the darkness or through the rubble. Senior, compared to a minute and 40 seconds ago, you're 2 kilograms lighter. It's normal to lose weight in high-intensity battles, but this extent is too great. And then? Only his smile could be considered relaxed. But for someone as solemn as him, a smile was a kind of abnormality. Ever since the 100% began, he had always been this abnormal. However, he still looked at Tianbang with extreme seriousness. It seems to be an amazing invention. Yeah, but I didn't scare you. It's really boring. Who said that? If I still had a heart, it would have broken my throat and flown out by now. That's true. Tianbang took his hands out of his pockets and assumed an offensive stance. This was the first time tonight that he had been so formal. I was going to ask you how much weight you lost, but now I don't have to think about it. What did he mean? The people who were paying attention to this battle had similar suspicions long ago. But the society had the advantage of having a secretary with extremely outstanding insight and knowledge to interpret the situation. Mr. Emoluan used the black soul body technique to completely ignite his fleshly body and undergo an irreversible power catalysis. In a sense, he's already dead. What's left in the world now is only his shadow and will. That's a lie. Just like that, if he doesn't do that, he doesn't have any chance of defeating Tianbang, a super burner that is infinitely close to becoming an extraordinary. The communication at the mission window had yet to end. The radiance of the formatting domain had already spread out once more. Compared to the previous eruption, its radiance was much dimmer. However, the radiance was restrained and condensed to the point of substance. It was relaxed and at will. Just this pinnacle of control caused all the burners present to be willing to offer up their knees in exchange for a moment of possession. And this was only a part of it. At the same time that the formatting domain spread out, Tian Bang's exposed skin was covered in a layer of bloody flames. The scorching and burning flames leaped endlessly, as if they were spurting out from the pores of his entire body. Chapter 425. Whoosh! Luonan suddenly jolted up from his bed. He had just taken a shower, but his body was already covered in a thin layer of sweat. This was the result of being startled. Cat eyes and the human-faced arachnid's clairvoyance perspective clearly displayed the scene within the ruins. At this moment, the world with Tian Bang at its core was clearly divided into 3 layers by the blood flames and the format of fire. The 3 layers appeared to be separated, but a subtle unity appeared within their internal logic because of Tian Bang's existence. What supported the essence of the burner's power was undoubtedly the archetype format, the high imitation of formatting theory stolen by Yen Hong and Quantum Corporation. However, was what appeared before his eyes truly the archetype format? Luonan turned around, his gaze pointing at the notebook on the bedside table. The 2 books were together. The top layer was his black notebook, and the bottom layer was his grandfather's experimental records. He reached over and pulled out the book at the bottom. His fingertips brushed across the somewhat bulging and deformed cover. He paused for a moment and lifted the cover, revealing the classic 3-layer structure of a tetrahedron, an inscribed sphere and an outer scribed sphere. There was no light in the room, but Luonan's heart lantern of the eye's orifice illuminated the room. The textures and lines of the diagram were all clear. The slight pauses and bends were all vivid in his mind. Of course, there was also the 16-word formula. My heart is a prison, my heart is a furnace. My heart calls for a mirror, my heart calls for a nation. The diagram and the words were so familiar that they were engraved in his soul. But at this moment, his fingertips clearly touched them, but he vaguely felt as if there was an invisible barrier between them. The mission window had become unprecedentedly lively due to the continuous intense scenes. Papercut and Shuele actively expressed their opinions, but Cat Eye's judgment was a bit more daring. It looks like he's at the extraordinary level. She didn't say which one, because regardless of whether it was Tian Bang or Mo Luan, their attacks and defenses had already surpassed the limits of the architect level. At least, this was how it seemed to her. Papercut was more in agreement. Mo Luan was only a hair away from becoming an extraordinary at his peak. Now that he's burning his body and soul with irreversible resolve, he might be able to touch the threshold of becoming an extraordinary. Secretary what do you think? Yuan avoided the question of extraordinary and responded, Tian Bang should be even stronger. In the early days of mechanical modification, his body's modification ratio had already exceeded 60%, yet he was able to gradually grasp the power of the archetype format day after day of experimentation. He didn't even have to borrow the dynamo core technology. This in itself is a miracle and a breakthrough type. At this moment, everyone could see that Mo Luan, who was directly in front of Tian Bang, was truly incompatible with the red, white, and black 3-layer structure. Naturally, he also suffered an unprecedented rejection and strong pressure. While they were discussing, Mo Luan's skinny body seemed to have been instantly pressed into the deep sea. Under the terrifying pressure from all directions, his body twisted and deformed before collapsing. Phew, a soft exhalation sounded, and it was surprisingly clear. With his aura, Mo Luan turned into a specter and appeared at Tian Bang's side. His posture was no different from before. A meaningless obsession, a person who has already entered the furnace. As he spoke, Tian Bang still maintained his attacking posture, but he didn't adjust his position according to Mo Luan's shift. He still looked ahead, even though there was nothing there. As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Luan's figure disintegrated once more and shifted once more. However, as long as he was covered by the formatting domain, it would be difficult for him to maintain stability in any direction for a long time. In other words, Tian Bang's domain possessed omnidirectional control. In the end, Mo Luan returned to the front of Tian Bang, facing his attacking posture directly. It really is a domain, right? He's completely taking the initiative. Papercut was convinced by Hiyuan's interpretation. He combined it with Cat Eye's judgment. Right now, is Tianbang already an extraordinary? I don't have the qualifications to judge. Hiyuan still didn't give a direct answer. At this time, a sentence was suddenly inserted into the mission window. Is the so-called super burner a breakthrough in the archetype format? The one who spoke was Luonan. The few people on this side of the mission window more or less knew of the complicated relationship between Luonan and the archetype format. The atmosphere of discussion suddenly froze. Luonan clearly asked Hiyuan, but she didn't respond. Luonan continued to ask about this. What step has the research of the archetype format progressed to in the end? His telepathic thoughts passed through the psychic wave network and was mapped into the virtual mission window, allowing others to perceive it. The corresponding state of mind, and will seem to penetrate space and reach a different corner of the city. This was an office that was approximately 20 square meters in size. The desks, chairs, and appliances were all modern and minimalist. The lines were sharp and bright, as if a 2D design had been moved here. It lacked a realistic texture. The only living existence in the office was Hiyuan. Right now, she was sitting quietly in an office chair. The holographic screen on her desk was constantly lit. Additionally, a projector was simultaneously projecting 4 or 5 virtual screens, representing the various affairs that were being handled. At the same time, there were figures coming and going outside the office. They provided assistance and services to the Brain Hub. It had only been a month since Hiyuan entered this type of office mode, but she had already gradually gotten used to this rhythm. She handled 3 to 5 affairs at the same time, involving the society, government affairs, family, and other domains. She handled them with ease. But at this time, she paused for a rare moment. Her gaze was blank. She was a bit tired, and she felt a bit powerless. Pacifying people's hearts had never been her area of expertise. She sat quietly like this for a moment. She didn't handle any affairs on the virtual desktop, nor did she respond to Luonan. She just fiddled with her wristband, activating a certain function. Her pupils contracted slightly. She adjusted the light filter so that she could see a virtual interface that had just been set up in the air. Only she could see it. A tetrahedron diagram appeared on the interface. There was a translucent letter B revolving within it. Hiyuan reached out her hand. Her palm examined the fingerprint path, body temperature, special waveband, and other information one by one. 2 seconds later, she passed through the secret identification. The next level of the page opened up, and the relevant database was opened to her. Tianbang. Codename TBX. Real-time status monitoring. Soon, a virtual human figure appeared on the side of the interface. All kinds of markings pointed out the relevant data of the key parts. There were also large amounts of formulas and explanations that flowed like water. Hiyuan roughly swept over the relevant entries. She muttered to herself in silence. Her wristband vibrated at this time. She received a call. After activating the invisible interface, all the calls that could come in were encrypted communications. Hiyuan swept her gaze over and accepted the call. Hello, Dr. Pan. Hello, Mrs. He. I just noticed that you entered the system query page. It's a bit rare, so I came to ask. Congratulations, Dr. Pan. You've made a breakthrough in your research. Right. Tianbang is currently in Xia City. You must know that you're paying attention to him. This kid will certainly be very happy. A clear and bright laughter came from the other side. There really has been decent progress so far. This is the credit of everyone in Team B. It is also the victory of the entire research system. Yes, this is the victory of the system. Wherever their figures passed, be it stone or steel, everything was swept and ground to pieces. Such strength could be said to have completely broken away from the limits of the human body. People couldn't help but consider him as an extraordinary. Affected by this situation, Papercut finally couldn't resist breaking the silence spell of the mission window. He said, "My eyes are going blurry. Come over here, professional. Who has the advantage right now?" In terms of body techniques, Mo Luan should be more experienced and ruthless. His rhythm is smoother. Xue Lei had also held back for a long time, so he immediately responded. Xue Lei's eyesight and judgment were worthy of the name professional. Mo Luan launched a wave of powerful attacks as soon as it was released. His unpredictable claws continuously broke through Tianbang's defense. The first attack that broke through Tianbang's defense almost stabbed into his eyes. In the end, it scraped open Tianbang's brow bone and blood splashed out. This was just the beginning. Following that, Tianbang's face, neck, chest, and shoulder were hit one after another. Mo Luan's blood flames, which were even purer, clearly suppressed Tianbang for the first time. Half of Tianbang's face was burned by the intertwining and twisting blood flames. His skin and flesh were lacerated for a time. It looked like his skull was about to be burned through. But even so, Tianbang's expression didn't have any particularly obvious changes. It made people wonder whether or not he had been completely transformed into a robot. It was very difficult for people to grasp such details by relying on monitoring equipment to observe. Luonan relied on the Wraith Sign's perspective to be sure. Victory and defeat were about to be decided. Luonan sighed. Tianbang's aura had yet to dissipate, but he suddenly roared. A storm of blood flames could be seen erupting. The powerful repulsive force forcefully swept Mo Luan away. Mo Luan's condensed black soul body showed great distortions and deformations. Then it catalyzed into smoke once more. Tianbang stared at the point where the black smoke split apart. The skin and flesh of his face that was charred by the flames twitched at a terrifying degree. In the end, it formed an extremely malevolent smile. "It's not over yet." The brightness of the bright formatting domain on the outside instantly exploded off the charts, forming a glaring white light. The silhouette of Mo Luan's figure was reflected under this screen of light. The misty smoke on the outside seemed to be frozen within the light. Mo Luan's figure reappeared. His face was the same as before, but his expression was grave and serious. It surpassed any moment before. Right now, the contrast in strength between the two sides had already appeared. Mo Luan used the secret technique of Black Soul Body to ignite his body and soul. For a short period of time, his explosive strength was formidable. He also appeared unkillable. But in the end, this was a decisive method. Sooner or later, he would burn out. And Tianbang, who had the formatting domain and the support of the blood flame willpower, already had the embryonic form of an extraordinary domain. It could be said that he was in an invincible position. Therefore, Tianbang, who appeared to be in a sorry state, was the one who truly held the upper hand. Luonan evaluated in a low voice, "It really is a good cage." The so-called formatting domain used the formatting fire to cover the material plane, as well as the shallow and middle layers of the mental plane. It used its special power of order to form a virtual cage. Mo Luan wanted to tear apart his bindings at all times to enter the depths of the mental plane and display his strong point. But he didn't succeed even once under the pressure of the formatting domain. And no matter how he seized the opportunity to attack, he was unable to deal fatal damage to Tianbang's steel-like iron body. He was even more unable to shake the erected domain. Just like this, he was unable to attack. He was unable to escape. He had already sunk into absolute passivity. Tianbang chose the most efficient, most concise, and most callous method. He consumed the embers of Mo Luan's body and soul bit by bit. Mo Luan had no other path. Just like how he chose to ignite his body and soul earlier, If he didn't do this, he would have been smashed into dregs by Tianbang's fist. The difference in strength erased too many options. Mo Luan would lose all his chips in this gamble sooner or later. Victory and defeat had been decided. He couldn't drag it out any longer. Luonan's thoughts were clear. The wraith sign silently churned in the depths of the mental plane. His six-colored demon eyes locked onto the material plane, differentiating the threat level of each target one by one. Mo Luan had been tossed and turned by bloated stomach before. The order led by the Blood Soul Temple had caused a bit of an effect on its chaotic nature. However, Luonan's incorporeal chains were unquestionably the #1 ruler. After the clear command was issued, the berserk chaotic element suppressed the order of the Blood Soul Temple, which lacked momentum. It even interfered with the imprints left behind by the shepherds on the Blood Soul Temple. Since it's already like this, the traction force began to take shape, and with a clanging sound, Ren Hong, who was under the protection of the formatted domain, trembled again. He opened his mouth and wanted to shout, but he couldn't make a sound. Very happily, Ren Hong put his hand on his throat. For the first time, he showed a genuine expression of fear. He looked around, his eyes drifting and vacant. It's starting. Many days later, the heavily chained crow appeared once more outside Luonan's core star region. It firmly locked onto Ren Hong's firefly and suddenly exerted force. Ren Hong's mouth was wide open. His heart was filled with terror. In his opinion, the ringing of the chains on the mental level was completely unreasonable. The corresponding special vibrations and restraints instantly spread to his entire body and soul structure. The feeling of numbness, the feeling of being bound, the feeling of being dominated, the consecutive senses all pointed to the same conclusion. He was under attack, not just from the shepherd's mark, but also from his body. The danger came from the shepherd's mark. It came from the Blood Soul Temple. A powerful binding force suddenly appeared. It was like a sinister and intense poison. It silently permeated and silently erupted, so much so that Luonan's mouth and tongue became numb. He could only watch helplessly as the shepherd's mark was forcibly pulled down from the second stage of the Bloodfire path. It returned to the lowest level of the lake of magma. The fluorescent light became dim, scattered, and unstable. The threat it posed to Ren Hong was suddenly raised to a whole new level. And at this time, Ren Hong's mind flashed with Lady Halder's warning before the herding method ceremony was held. The herding method is to advance and not retreat. Live and die with the Blood Soul Temple. If you retreat midway, the power of the backlash will exceed everyone's imagination. Oh no. Luonan's severely sluggish brain cells were no longer able to bear the weight of his thoughts. The firefly had already melted in the lake of magma before he could finish his thought. What was even worse was that this process was like a falling domino. It spread from the lowest level of the Blood Soul Temple all the way down to where Ren Hong's body was located. That firefly was too precise. The change in the situation somewhat exceeded Luonan's expectations. He had been paying close attention to the nature of the shepherd's mark. He had been affected by the precision of his senses, so he wasn't able to see it clearly. Only when the mark dissolved in the magma did he catch a glimpse of it. Luonan wasn't able to see it too clearly, but he was able to confirm that the so-called shepherd's mark was a complex structural circuit similar to the dripping sword. At first glance it seemed to be much more complex. The precision of the structure was even greater than the condensation ring structure he was so proud of. Deducing from practical experience, wouldn't the shepherd's strength be 10 times that of his in order to form such a complex circuit? Although Ren Hong was the deputy first ablatum of the Blood Flame Order, His strength was at best between C+ and B-. It was impossible for him to reach this level. Luo Nan suddenly came to a realization when the terrifying backlash force surged back. The blood flame order's herding technique must have used special techniques to transcend ranks to mold this type of complex configuration. From the looks of it, it certainly involved the resonance of the soul and energy. The effort invested was no small matter. Luo Nan was shocked. This was no longer just an imprint. It was a branch of the body and soul that grew here. If something were to happen and they weren't cut off in time, it would bring about a fatal chain reaction. Perhaps Ren Hong had a way to reduce the damage, but he was bound by Luo Nan's invisible chains. He lost his best opportunity. In the underground parking lot, Ren Hong's entire body was already frozen to death. He couldn't do anything. The invisible and traceless shackles and the terrifying backlash completely dominated his mind. The deep blue walkers protecting him finally realized something was wrong at this time. They immediately called for help. Only 2 seconds passed. Another 7 or 8 deep blue walkers arrived at Ren Hong's location, in addition to the 4th squad from before. The one leading them was Tian Bang's deputy, Senior Colonel Meng Tuesday. The group didn't say anything after they arrived. They synchronized and coordinated with Meng Tu at the center. Flames spread out and interweaved into a relatively independent region. This was a formatting domain without a doubt. It was a mystical place capable of dispelling the vast majority of extraordinary powers. It was reasonable to say that mental attacks and curse techniques would find it hard to penetrate this barrier. This was the most outstanding response Meng Tu could muster. It's a pity that the medicine isn't right. The connection between the backlash from the Blood Soul Temple and Ren Hong was much deeper and more concealed. It was a destructive force that directly acted upon the structure of Ren Hong's body and soul from the position of the polar domain. With the existence of the Cloud World and the secret lock that was Gear, even if the military dug 3 feet deep into Xia City, they would not be able to find the whereabouts of the Wraith Sign. As for the group of people from the Blood Flame Order in Xia City, Luo Nan waited quietly for a moment. His thoughts flickered. He did not use the telescope, but he could see the turbulent layers of clouds rolling past like the waves of the sea. It was just as he had sensed in the Cloud World. The connection between his soul body and his fleshly body had not been severed. Then it was possible for his connection with the Wraith Sign to be maintained. In this way, even if he did not come to Gear in the future, he could still use the Wraith Sign to grasp the situation over there in real time. This was extremely ideal. Of course, he was able to maintain a smooth connection under the enormous and complex warps of the void, but this did not mean that others could do the same. Luo Nan's mind cut into the Wraith Sign's body, paying attention to the Blood Soul Temple. At this time, the 3 fireflies in the garden-like structure of the 2nd floor had already been extinguished. This represented that the connection between this place and the outside world had been completely severed. This point was in line with Luo Nan's expectations. The Wraith Sign was able to temporarily block the connection in the polar domain. There was no reason for it to exist in the current situation, but it was worth noting that the extinguished fireflies did not return to nothingness. The 3 shepherd imprint configurations still existed. They transformed into gloomy grains of sand that fell on the 2nd floor of the Blood Soul Temple. If Luo Nan had not been constantly monitoring them, he would have overlooked them. The shepherd imprint was indeed quite sinister. Luo Nan's consciousness streaked across the imprint that belonged to Emolun. He was a bit puzzled. The imprint of a dead person was actually preserved, and he could not see the difference between it and the other 2 imprints. He should have cleaned it up earlier. Oh, looking at Ren Hong's fate, he was going to die. Forget about it. In any case, Luo Nan was in the stomach of the Wraith Sign, and he was under the control of the formatting theory system. He was not afraid of any mischief. Luonan paid attention to this. He did not want to stay in this sensitive area for too long. He made a detour around the large residential area and returned home. After his body and soul became one, Luonan looked over at Aurora Cloud City. Tianbang was quite calm. He issued orders one after another, attempting to lock onto the traces of Lady Halder and the other backbones of the Blood Flame Order of Xia City. But the clearer his goal was, the more it deviated from reality. Luonan swept a glance, and the corner of his lips hooked up. That's right. Tianbang was in the limelight today. Chapter 433. Di Weiwu said this, but when the main course of the dining hall was served, Di Weiwu adopted the posture of sweeping away the clouds like a whirlwind. He buried his head in his plate, unwilling to lift it up. He had ample reason for this. My body is growing, so I must ingest sufficient nutrients. Even if it's a bit excessive, I can digest it through training. As he spoke, the kid even patted Worker Zhai's arm. That's why I'm quite grateful to you, Godfather. Whether it's a thunderhawk or a swift, it's always good to have a place to digest the accumulated food. Worker Zhai had to hold his forehead at Luonan's aged appearance. Luckily, the kid soon threw himself into a new plate, and Worker Zhai had the opportunity to talk to Luonan about other things. I've tested the move you spoke of last time. It really is effective. My soul strength and interference power have both grown. Luonan didn't react at all. Worker Zhai simply spoke the truth when he saw Luonan like this. He looked at the cup of water in front of him with rapt attention. 2 seconds later, a drop of water the size of a fingernail rose from the cup, hovering above the rim. Luonan finally understood. Wasn't this the effect of the condensation ring he spoke to Papercut about when they were waiting last time? It's done? Before Worker Zhai could finish speaking, the drop of water above the rim of the cup collapsed and scattered. Worker Zhai's face was a bit pale, and a layer of sweat seeped from his forehead. This technique clearly consumed a lot of energy for him. Of course, 10 days ago, he wouldn't even be able to touch the edge of this move with his unawakened level. Worker Zhai wiped away his sweat. In a non-combat state, it can last for approximately 1 second. As for the combat state, there was no need to talk about it. 2 seconds of preparation time was practically meaningless in actual combat. Hold on. Let me think. The Sanzhou training Luonan received consumed too much mental energy. Chatting normally was fine, but he needed to compose himself and refocus his attention if he wanted to talk business. Half a minute later, he said, the volume of this condensation ring is too large. Its diameter is nearly 0.3 millimeters. It needs to be a bit smaller to increase the stability of the structure. Shuelei poked Luonan's arm when he saw the two begin their discussion. The dining hall's partitions were pretty good, so they didn't need to worry about other people seeing them. Don't forget that the kid Di Weiwu was right next to them. Di Weiwu was very sensitive about such things. He immediately glared at Shuelei. Isn't it just extraordinary power? What's there to hide? Shuelei let out an ah and choked. Di Weiwu disdainfully said, it's only you young ladies and young masters in the city who bury your faces in the sand like ostriches. As long as it's a vagrant who has fought in the wilderness, who wouldn't know? As he spoke, the kid pouted at Worker Zhai. If it weren't for the fact that he has this kind of ability, I wouldn't have liked him. Worker Zhai couldn't take it anymore and slapped the back of the little guy's head. Don't talk nonsense. Di Weiwu immediately glared at him, but was defeated by Worker Zhai's gaze. Mumbling, he buried his face in his plate and continued to dig in. Luonan wasn't particularly surprised by this sort of thing. He just sighed with emotion. In a certain sense, the so-called high wall between the inner world and the normal world is as thin as a piece of paper. Shuelei, on the other hand, was stimulated by this piece of information. His train of thought jumped to another level. Worker Zhai, you want the little guy to learn martial arts because you want him to enter this circle? Yes, this will depend on his aptitude. Naturally, it would be ideal if he could gain a comprehensive understanding of the world. But in this case, building a foundation is extremely important. He can't go and mess around. Worker Zhai nodded in agreement. This is indeed the case, but I don't know if he has the talent in this area. What path he will take in the future is still undecided. I'm not afraid of that. With the guidance of a famous teacher and his willingness to put in effort, he'll more or less know the difference in talent in 3 to 5 months. Nothing will be delayed. Shuelei could be said to be more than half an expert in this area. Just like this, the two opened up a new topic of conversation. Worker Zhai forgot to talk about the condensation ring. He really did care a lot about his adopted son. Luonan was tossed aside. He simply learned from Di Weiwu, burying his head in food and replenishing his energy. On the other side, Di Weiwu looked like he was full. He looked over with wide eyes. His gaze was completely within Luonan's senses. After being stared at for a long time, Luonan felt uncomfortable. He raised his head and asked, "What's wrong? It seems like you're quite capable." "I'm all right. How do you compare to him?" Di Weiwu was secretly pointed at Worker Zhai. "Your adopted father? Oh, we each have our strong points. Worker Zhai has been teaching me engineering all this time." Di Weiwu directly interrupted. "In other words, you're stronger than him in terms of extraordinary strength. Were kids these days all this straightforward?" Di Weiwu noticed Luonan's gaze and glanced at Worker Zhai. He saw this enthusiastic adopted father earnestly asking for guidance from Shuelei. He was just short of taking note. Di Weiwu felt that speaking too bluntly wasn't good, so he simply walked around the table and sat next to Luonan. "Hey, if you're really capable, then teach me. You just said that extraordinary strength isn't that amazing." "Bullshit. You misinterpreted my words. Do you have any sincerity?" Luonan continued to tease him. "You speak vulgarities the moment you open your mouth. Where's your sincerity? It's fine if you don't want to teach me. I don't care. Also, it's my fault for speaking vulgarities. I'll apologize to you." Di Weiwu feigned magnanimity, but unfortunately, he couldn't hold it in. Luonan couldn't help but grin at this honest kid. He casually rubbed Worker Zhai's head. "Teaching you really isn't a big deal, but I'm afraid that I won't teach you well. Especially when it comes to laying the foundation. You still need to find a good teacher. Since you have the skill, why can't you teach me well?" Di Weiwu finally asked a childish question that suited his age. Luonan wanted to answer seriously, but he felt that it was too complicated. He thought for a bit and said, "Well, teaching students requires a lot of energy. I'm still studying. I have to work. There are many other things. I'm often distracted. I'm not focused." So he was tossed around miserably today. Di Weiwu blinked his eyes. "Not focused? I can teach you this." "What's with that look in your eyes? You don't believe me, right? I learned my true skills from Dean Wan. All you need to do is follow the method I taught you and seriously observe the precepts for a period of time. Attention, concentration, and so on. It's absolutely this." He stuck up his thumb and wiggled it in front of Luonan's eyes. "Dean Wan?" Luonan finally couldn't hold it in any more at this time. "The Dean Wan you're talking about, is he the one in the recycling stratum of the Forest Wall district? Is he the one who often gives people? The one who teaches? You know?" Di Weiwu was shocked. I have two friends who have received guidance from Dean Wan. I don't know if you recognize them or not. One is surnamed Xie, and the other. The one with the surname Du is a sissy, right? Di Weiwu laughed, ha. They've been going to the institute quite often recently. They've donated quite a bit of money. Thanks to their blessings, I'll be able to live a bit more comfortably over there in the future. Chapter 434. Children's senses and emotions changed very quickly. Di Weiwu originally didn't like Luonan very much. But now that they had a common topic of conversation, Dean Wan, and their positions were relatively close, Di Weiwu's attitude was completely different with just a few words. Luonan actually wanted to ask about the creation order, but he swallowed his words in the end. From his perspective, it was better for children to stay away from religion. Even though the little fellow had been deeply influenced by Dean Wan, he still wasn't a little saint who talked about the teachings of the creation order. This was good enough. It wasn't just Di Weiwu. Du Yong and Xie Junping didn't seem to be brainwashed. It was for this reason that Luonan had a pretty good impression of the creation order. The only thing he wasn't sure about right now was whether or not Worker Zhai knew about the creation order. Worker Zhai was a bit surprised when he found an opportunity to ask, Dean Wan is an ability user? Or a member of the order? You don't know? I've only met him twice. We didn't talk for long. I just remember that he was nimble with his hands. Some of the handicrafts he made were of a very high level. Some of the models had outstanding structures, proportions, and precision. Really? Luonan had a pensive look. Could it be that the so-called creation was just a literal meaning and not the meaning of creator? Worker Zhai had a good impression of Dean Wan. I think there shouldn't be a problem. Dean Wan has a good personality. Di Weiwu, who had been eavesdropping, shouted, Of course there's no problem with Dean Wan. Are you guys spies? Why are you asking so many questions? Luonan laughed. No, I'm just curious. People in our circle talk about all sorts of things, but we're all connected. Isn't it fate? The little fellow was quite satisfied with this explanation. He patted Luonan on the shoulder, pretending to be generous. There's definitely fate. Actually, if you guys are interested in Dean Wan, you can go talk to him. You don't need to pick a time. Tonight is fine. You guys can send me to the orphanage. I'll live there. Di Weiwu felt a bit guilty when he said this. Actually, the main reason for his proposal was that he didn't want to return to the Trigate district, a place where he couldn't find any fun. Luonan, Shuelei, and Worker Zhai exchanged glances. The restaurant was located on the west side of the River Wu district. It wouldn't take much time to get there. Half a minute later, Di Weiwu's suggestion took effect. Both the host and the guest enjoyed the meal. Di Weiwu, who claimed to be temperate, went out holding his stomach. After leaving the restaurant, they walked a short distance to the nearest bus stop. The orphanage was located in the Forest Wall District's recycling layer. The centipedes normally wouldn't go there, so only low-altitude public transportation was on the way. Di Weiwu took advantage of this time to instill Luonan with the superiority of the concept of upholding the precepts. As long as you can persevere, it won't be long before you'll discover that you're super efficient at doing things. Your memory will be excellent and you'll be able to multitask. I'm not lying to you. There were a few times when Dean Wan talked to a few of us at the same time. Everyone had a different topic, but he never messed up his answers. Of course, that's an even more powerful technique. I think it's called coordination. Overall planning. Luonan was a bit moved. He was faced with a myriad of things to worry about. What he lacked the most right now was the ability to plan and arrange. He always felt that he didn't have enough time. When he did one thing, he would be dragged down by another. His concentration was severely lacking. There was no need for Gym Master Xiao to lecture him. He was already tired of it. Luonan's wristband vibrated as he was thinking. Someone called. Luonan's eyelids jumped when he saw the caller's name. It matched his terrible premonition. Emoya opened her mouth and said, Nanster, remember to tell him when you get home. I won't be going home tonight. Luonan quivered when he heard this. He instinctively raised his voice. Go find Emopeng. I won't be going home tonight either. Where will you be staying if you're not going home? I'm in the River Wu district. Where do you think I'll be staying? Blue Bay? Then you should go home. I'm commandeering this place tonight. Luonan was so angry that his teeth hurt. He gnashed his teeth and said, Emoya, don't go too far. I really want to leave you a bedding, but there are a few beauties here. They aren't willing. Someone suddenly came over and shouted, Who said that? If you're a handsome guy, then come over. Big sis will love you. Get lost. Emoya pushed her flirtatious friend to the side. She chuckled and asked Luonan, Are you coming over? I'm going to stay at a hotel. In any case, I absolutely won't go home and take the blame for you. Luonan directly hung up the phone. Actually, he let out a breath of relief. He was really worried that a man's voice would be heard in the background. Emoya's heart had really gone wild after taking a stroll around the Manching Music Festival. She hadn't spent more than 5 days at home in the half a month that she had been back in Xia City. She spent most of her time outside, making her aunt hopping mad. Unfortunately, she had already graduated to adulthood. She possessed the ability to act, and she always had her own opinions. Her family couldn't control her even if they wanted to. It must be said that Emoya's personality and temperament were trustworthy, but the underground music circle was famous for being chaotic. Luonan's heart twitched, not to mention his aunt and uncle. He was afraid that his cousin would fall into that chaotic circle. Chapter 435. Worker Zhai stared blankly for a moment before realizing that he had become the target of ridicule. He turned his head to look. There were 6 or 7 people over there, all around 20 or 30 years old. They were all smiling right now, but it was hard to tell who had spoken just now. Half of these people wore the same uniform. On the right chest was an abstract image of a bird. It looked like twisted lightning. Worker Zhai knew where these people came from when he saw this logo. Thunder Falcon Dojo. There was an escalator bridge a short distance away from the bus stop. It just so happened to lead to the newly launched branch dojo under the advertisement space of the shopping mall. This group of people must have taken advantage of the opening of the dojo to drink and celebrate. Luonan and Shui Lei knew a bit more than Worker Zhai. They had already locked onto the person who had just spoken. The fellow's face was a bit red, and he was staggering a bit as he walked. It was clear that he had drunk too much. But even so, they were able to recognize that they had met this person once before. Feng Jiajun, the dojo instructor who had hung out with He Donglu at Ocean Sky Cloud City. From then on, he radiated an abnormal hostility towards Shui Lei and the divine Yu Jim. Luonan's field of view was a bit wider. Aside from this group of people, he also noticed that there was another person who was on the phone 20 to 30 meters away. This person was originally on the same line as Feng Jiajun and the others. He was just distracted, so he fell behind. This fellow was also an acquaintance. Luonan and Shui Lei were unwilling to pay attention to a drunkard like Feng Jiajun. Worker Zhai had an easygoing personality. He just furrowed his brows and didn't say anything. He even hugged Di Weiwu to prevent the kid from causing trouble. It had to be said that Worker Zhai understood his adopted son's personality very well. Even though he hugged Di Weiwu in time, words still came out of Di Weiwu's mouth. Who the hell are you? Feng Jiajun was currently tipsy. He laughed and took 2 steps forward. He extended his hand to touch Di Weiwu's head, but Di Weiwu avoided him. He snorted and pointed his arm at Shui Lei, unwilling to let him go. Coach Shui, your dojo can't continue operating anymore. There's no need to push people into a pit, right? Clearly, Feng Jiajun's eyes and ears were half-baked after he was drunk. He didn't hear the first half of Shui Lei's words, which was tantamount to talking about his own dojo. Wu immediately laughed out loud. Then, he raised his head and complained to Worker Zhai, "You picked all over the place. Thunder Falcon and Lightning Bird? They're not that great." Even he himself said that he was tricked. Feng Jiajun was no longer able to tell that Worker Zhai and his son were in cahoots with Luo Nan and Shuelei. He really did have a problem with his brain. "5 minutes later, Luo Nan stood in front of the orphanage that he had scanned with his telepathic thoughts. Luo Nan was quite curious about the Dean Wan that the Zhai father and son spoke of, and the guide that Xie Juping and Du Yong spoke of. He really wanted to know what was so special about this person, aside from the face of the preacher that he had sensed before. But when they knocked on the door, they heard this piece of news. Dean Wan went out. It looks like he accepted an invitation. Nurse Wang of the orphanage was acquainted with the Zhai father and son. This old woman understood the ways of the world. She welcomed them in and greeted them warmly. This orphanage was reconstructed from the lower level of an abandoned shopping mall. Relatively speaking, it was already a relatively safe place on the recycling stratum. Over 20 rooms were separated and 30 or so people lived there. All of them were teenagers and children under the age of 14. Most of them should have been asleep at this time, but Di Weiwu's arrival caused quite a few of his little friends to become excited in an instant. They chattered noisily, forcing Nurse Wang to use the name of the dean to suppress them. Everything was settled down with great difficulty. Nurse Wang took the place of Dean Wan and fulfilled her duties as the host. She led Worker Zhai and Luo Nan around the orphanage. Luo Nan's impression of this place gradually grew clearer. In his eyes, the deepest impression that the overall layout of the orphanage gave people was that it was simple yet extremely stylish. For example, the reception room. There were crisscrossing pipes overhead, but the entire floor was painted ash gray. There were wooden frames of the same color on the walls, and there were short tables of the same color on the floor. There were also 2 half-worn peach-colored sofas and a recliner that came from God knows where. The fruit platter on the short table was in the shape of an extremely interesting ladle. The light emitted from the iron cover hanging from the ceiling made people feel extremely comfortable. Luo Nan let out an "oh" and didn't say anything more. The journey was smooth. They arrived at Ocean Sky Cloud City in about 20 minutes. The atmosphere in the large living area was a bit worse than it was a dozen days ago. The collapse of Aurora Cloud City's parking lot had scared quite a few people. Right now, the construction team was still working on the repairs. The security team had already helped Luo Nan check in on the way here. Luo Nan and Qin Ikuan went straight upstairs after getting off the car. Qin Ikuan specifically chose a high-altitude bedroom on the 150th floor. Ocean Sky Cloud City's most famous viewing platform was a few floors down. That's right. Luo Nan chose Ocean Sky Cloud City not just because this place was only a few steps away from Acumen College. It would save him quite a bit of trouble when he went to school tomorrow morning. More importantly, there was a flying devil ray that he could use here. Luo Nan and Qin Ikuan just came out of the elevator when they saw the water within the central crystal pillar stir. The enormous body of the devil ray was like a bomber flying through the water. It swept past the crystal wall closest to the elevator and greeted Luo Nan. So this is an infrasonic wave generator. Qin Ikuan was a bit moved. With the flying devil ray as a tool, Luo Nan's combat strength could already be evaluated as a B+ rank. Moreover, the sky was his main battlefield. He could come and go as he pleased. So from Luo Nan's perspective, This place was probably the safest place in Xia City aside from President Ouyang's laboratory. Qin Yikuan obviously understood Luo Nan's intentions. He was very grateful for this. In a public place like a hotel, any security team would have a relatively thorough contingency plan. It saved him a lot of effort. "I'll be next door. Mr. Luo, just call me if you need anything." "There shouldn't be anything. I'll go take a stroll on the viewing platform in a bit." "I'll go with you." Qin Yikuan didn't forget that this 16-year-old youth's battle had taken place there. Even if Luo Nan didn't believe that headquarters would send people over to make a move, he still had to prevent certain people from losing their minds and going crazy, right? Luo Nan didn't mind. He entered the room and gave a rough glance before coming out and heading to the viewing platform. There were people coming down from the upper floor when he entered the elevator. There were 7 or 8 of them, and the elevator was half full. They seemed to be quite familiar with each other. They were all talking. They should be attending a gathering or something at the same time. The gathering was over right now. Chapter 438. Luo Nan's ears perked up when he heard a rather familiar word. The speaker's voice was actually quite soft. It wasn't very obvious in the exchange of greetings between the group of people, but it couldn't be hidden from ability users like Luo Nan and Qin Yikuan. Qin Yikuan had done his homework quite well. He noticed Luo Nan's expression, so he shot a glance in that direction and raised his spirits. As for Luo Nan, he didn't need to turn his head at all within this narrow space. He could distinguish everyone's faces purely by relying on his mental senses. Then he noticed a familiar face. What a coincidence! The person who spoke in front continued, "With this skill, we must continue to work hard and make a name for ourselves as soon as possible. In this day and age, the most undesirable thing is to be pretentious. If we have the ability, we must show it to others. Let's not go back first. Let's go to the viewing platform to get some fresh air and have a deep chat." At this time, the elevator went down to the 142nd floor, where the viewing platform was. The elevator door opened, and Luo Nan and Qin Yikuan glanced at each other. Qin Yikuan extended his hand to indicate for Luo Nan to go first. Luo Nan nodded and went out first, but he felt that Qin Yikuan's reaction was a bit off. He paid attention to the target, but that was all. His level of vigilance did not keep up. Luo Nan ignored what was behind him after walking out of the elevator. He walked straight in the direction of the viewing binoculars. His behavior was quite natural, but at the same time, he privately contacted Qin Yikuan through the hexeer. Ability user. Which one? The one who didn't speak. If it weren't for Qin Yikuan's well-trained training, he would have turned around and left. At this moment, 2 more people came out of the elevator and turned in the direction of the heavenly ocean lake. They were the 2 people who wanted to have a deep chat. Qin Yikuan listened carefully to the man's footstep. At the same time, he tried his best to sense, but he did not discover anything new. "I can't sense anything at all." Yes, he hit it very well. If Luo Nan hadn't been able to see the scene of this person preaching from afar through his mental senses, he would have inadvertently missed this person. The most amazing thing was that the other party didn't seem to be deliberately concealing it. Instead, in the most natural state, it restrained all the abnormal aura and maintained the most harmonious state with the surrounding environment, just like his work. At this time, the conversation on the other side was going on. The person who spoke earlier seemed to be very impatient. As soon as he stood still, he said in an especially excited tone, "I've already thought about it. I'll use concepts like the meditation club or the oxygen bar. Although it sounds like it's all over the place, as long as there's a living example like Xie Junping, those elites and rich second-generation heirs who've had enough fun will still flock to him." The so-called second young master of the Xie clan was indeed Xie Junping. Luo Nan was certain in his heart. He walked to the edge of the platform. It looked like he was admiring the night scenery, but his mental senses enveloped the entire platform. The man who had been silent for a long time finally spoke. He did not seem to be very enthusiastic about it. Director Wu, this Director Wu was probably a director of some company. When he talked about business, he could not stop talking. He interrupted him and said, I can tell that you don't have any concept. Did you know that this was the way of the Castlevania Financial Group? Have you heard of the Castle Financial Group? No. Then you should have heard of the brand Shinda, right? Sportswear? That's right. There are also a few others. Director Wu casually mentioned 3 or 4 brands with world or regional fame. These are all intangible assets of the Castle Financial Group. Just these alone have a market value of over 10 billion. And I just heard some news recently. Standing behind this financial group is a order. What do you think? I don't have any thoughts. I don't understand what you mean. I want you to pay attention to the interesting chemical reaction that will occur when an order and capital are added. I also know Mrs. Halder of the Castle Financial Group. She's a skilled trader, but I believe that I'm not inferior to her. But 10 days ago, the assets under her banner were over 5 times mine. Director Wu spent a few minutes describing the relationship between the Castle Financial Group and the Blood Flame Order. From what Luonan knew of the inside story, there were many elements of hearsay in Director Wu's words. There were even a few laughable mistakes, but the general sequence of events was made clear. Luonan discovered once again that he had overestimated the thickness of the barrier between the secular world and the inner world. The conflict between the 2 factions of the Blood Flame Order had already caused an impact in the secular world. The repercussions had yet to fade. Director Wu learned some knowledge from this. I'm a bit late in understanding that business can be done this way. Actually, the order and capital, the mystic arts and money, have been a perfect match since ancient times. Fortunately, it's not too late. You just said that they didn't have a good ending. That's only relative. In fact, they've already settled down in T-City. The projects they've invested in still receive the full support of the T-City government. They're still the capital protected by the laws of the Earth Coalition government. What's this? This is world-class influence. Director Wu's tongue was like a lotus flower. He tried to convince the man in front of him in one fell swoop. We can completely follow this path. You preach, I make money, we support each other. I don't understand all this. I just want to ask, Director Wu, aren't you going to do a few treatments? I think it's very appropriate to follow the order's method of moderation and getting used to it. Director Wu's expression changed slightly. He laughed again. That's it. I think it can convince a lot of people. Think about it a bit more. This conversation fully illustrated the maxim of not getting along with each other. A conversation that could create billions of wealth ended hastily. Director Wu maintained a polite smile. In reality, he left with resentment. In order to avoid the elevator that was destined to be awkward, the other person waited for a moment. Then he cast his gaze over and swept his gaze over. After all, there were only these 2 groups of people on the entire platform. Qin Ikuan observed carefully and seriously. Who knew that Luonan would raise his hand in the open? Is it Dean Wan? Luonan listened from beginning to end. He was already convinced that this ability user, who didn't seem to have any inhuman characteristics, was the welfare Dean Wan Ta that he had missed. Luonan recognized Wan Ta, but Wan Ta didn't recognize Luonan. He had a bit of suspicion on his face. You are Luonan. Luo as in Luolai, Nan as in Nan Nan. Wan Ta's eyebrows moved slightly. He had probably heard of this name before. He said it out loud. You're the one that Junping and Little Yong talked about, yeah. Their awakening ceremony went smoothly, right? Luonan laughed as he walked forward. It will probably take a month or 2 for them to truly comprehend and cross the threshold. Many thanks for your help in guiding them. Their path is very proper, and you didn't spoil things through excessive enthusiasm. Wan Ta laughed very peacefully. He chatted about these extraordinary abilities like he was chatting about his daily life. Luonan also chatted very naturally. He started chatting casually. Actually, we just went to pay a visit to your home. It's the orphanage in the Forest Wall district. Did Junping and Little Yong have any problems with their training? No. I went with Worker Zhai and Di Weiwu. Wan Ta was a bit surprised. Worker Zhai? Di Donghua?